Welcome. It is 11 o'clock New York, and we're welcoming all of you today to our daily webinar here at the Hispanic Response and Recovery Plan, part of the Hispanic Star in Action. This aims to be a clearinghouse of information and action for all of us to make sure that we're connected, that we're informed, that we can take better decisions, but also that we together do something to mitigate the incredible impact that COVID-19 has in our community, particularly those most affected, small businesses, entrepreneurs, independent workers, the sharing economy, the gig economy, the service industry, the agriculture industry. We're here together, and every day we're bringing you different guests, masters of what they're doing, so that we can be informed, so that we can get educated about something that we can learn and something that we can do. And it is an absolute pleasure for me to welcome my former colleague, my friend, Dawda Jobarteh, who is the global head of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Strategy Hub. Dawda, you and I have worked together in the past. You and I were part of the United Nations, at the Executive Office of the Secretary General of the United Nations when we were launching and amplifying the Sustainable Development Goals. It is such a pleasure to have you here today, Dawda. You're going to be talking to Hispanic leaders. You're here today to address Hispanics in the US, 60 million people, 18% of the population, massive population, massively affected as well by COVID-19. Tell us a little bit, Dawda, if you don't mind, just like you have an entire presentation, I would like you to share with us what is the United Nations doing, particularly your office, through the Sustainable Development Goals to address COVID-19. And if you don't mind, just like start by addressing what are the Sustainable Development Goals and how, what is your office doing to address COVID-19?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for the invitation to join this amazing group. Second of all, I hope everyone is safe, everyone's families are safe, and everyone is doing everything they can to flatten the curve. The Sustainable Development Goals are the plan for a fair and just society. There's 17 goals that were agreed upon by every single head of state, head of government of the world in 2015 to create a comprehensive plan for the future in terms of guaranteeing sustainability, oceans, education, health, which at the moment is suffering greatly, decent work, economic benefits, et cetera, et cetera. It covers every single aspect of society and of life with the idea that just as we're seeing right now, an injustice somewhere is an injustice everywhere, as Martin Luther King would have said, and the world needs to really, really come together in solidarity to fight this invisible virus. I'm going to go really, really quickly covering what it is that our office is doing. The Sustainable Development Goals are the plan for the recovery phase in terms of, we have a couple of different segments right now. We have an emergency health situation on our hands that we need to get through and over, while doing so, linking that back to the Sustainable Development Goals and rewiring the world in the way that will increase resilience, will ensure that people are safe, that economies can reboot, that the furthest behind and most enfranchised are no longer disenfranchised and are actually put to the top, and all of the activities, policies, stimulus programs are reflective of their inclusion. So as you said, I'm the global head of the Sustainable Development Group Strategy Hub in the UN Office for Partnerships. We're actively working on a couple of different fronts. WHO, the World Health Organization, is taking the lead on the health side of things. The UN writ large is taking the lead on the socioeconomic impact side of the equation. That includes humanitarian, it includes the education sector, it includes children, it includes refugees, it covers the whole remit of who is being impacted by this. This is the coronavirus is impacting the world differently all at the same time. There are different countries that are dealing with it in different ways. We have different leaders reacting differently, both economically, socially, from a policy, from a security perspective. And again, it's really the need, and what we've seen is that it doesn't matter what one country does, it matters what every country does and how we all go in it together. And in that is inclusive of the Hispanic community in the United States and abroad as well. What we have done is we've done a couple of different things. We have put a visual identity and a branding on the COVID response. So I'm going to share my screen really, really quickly so that you can see what it is that we've done. And we're encouraging everyone to use that branding however they see fit and however is relevant and important to them. This is the branding on the screen, the COVID-19 response. It is what the United Nations is using, and it is what we are asking and encouraging other people to use. The reason why we've chosen this, and the logic is, as you'll see, is it's the virus, it's the world that is being protected by people coming together in solidarity against the virus on the outer ring. The band under here is all of the colors of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that each represent a goal and an objective in a certain specific area of life. We have come up with 6 stickers or stamps that indicate the key priority areas by both the WHO, the World Health Organization, as well as the United Nations writ large. So it's around personal hygiene, hand washing, around physical distancing to flatten the curve. It's around knowing your symptoms and knowing what to do if and so you feel you were affected or infected by this. It's around busting myths and making sure that only authoritative, accurate information is going where it needs to go. It's around spreading kindness, because without kindness, we are not going to succeed in this. And it's around solidarity, bringing people together. Our idea and our hope is much like the Sustainable Development Goal wheels. Organizations, individuals, entities will use this branding, again, to show that there is a collective behind this response, right? That we're putting an army of influencers, of Hispanic influencers specifically, in combating this pandemic. We've also gone about in doing something which I'll get into now as well, but you will see how it shows up in the UN ecosystem. This is their page. It will be up here on the masthead by the end of today. And then, this is one of the most visited sites at the moment. It is going to show up throughout it as well. So there will be a full integration of that. We have also put out a call for proposal, an open brief, what we're calling, again, trying to leverage the ingenuity and collective genius of the creative community on amplifying the WHO and UN messaging, again, to combat fake news, to combat myths, to inform people, individuals, organizations, businesses with authoritative information that is going to help keep them safe along those 6 categories. We've so far received, and it's been up only about 8 days or so, 7,500 submissions from 124 countries in multiple languages, including Spanish. We haven't pushed all of the content out yet, but this is just a really, really quick sample of what some of that content looks like. And again, it's available for anyone to download, anyone to use, anyone to brand, however they see fit, provided it is in the spirit of flattening the curve, keeping people safe, and informing people with authoritative information. The brand guidelines are there. The URL can be shared. It's COVID-19 logo for this website. For the stamp website, it is COVID-19 stamps, plural.org. And all of those source files can be downloaded and for use for anyone. With regard to the open brief, there are multiple things that can be done. Again, it's a playful gesture. It's to make people better informed. It's with the hope that people will push this information and content out, and we will effectively flood not only social media, but media channels with authoritative information that people can act on. And I know that this group is really, really focused on action, and a lot of what is found here is action-oriented, and if fulfilled, will help flatten the curve and keep people safe. I will stop there. Apart from saying, we are all in this together, we will only get through this together. There's a deep acknowledgement that Hispanics within the US and abroad are most affected, along with some other demographics, but tremendously affected negatively by this in terms of employment, in terms of health, in terms of susceptibility of infection, in terms of the inability to continue to send remittances back home to help the economies back home wherever home is. And these are all things that, again, different people, different organizations and businesses are going to need to play a significant role in rebuilding not only the society that we have in a more fair and just way, but the economies and the interactions amongst and between countries, societies, neighbors, friends, and families. So in this, what I can do is commit our resources and our ingenuity to help in these efforts that you are leading, both in terms of the response and the recovery phase. And we're really just genuinely humbled to be working alongside everybody on this.
Thank you, Dawda. I mean, this is incredible, and I would like to pick on a number of things that you mentioned just to get deeper. I mean, I just want to make sure that the people that are listening understand that the Sustainable Development Goals is a historic agreement that for the first time, Dawda, 193 countries agreed on the things that we're going to work on together. And having that signed by 193 countries with the promise of we're going to be the last generation that, with extreme poverty, we're going to be the first generation that will be able to eradicate extreme poverty, that we will be the last generation that will be able to mitigate climate change. And this is the first time in history that we can elevate the playing field for all. That's the promise of the Sustainable Development Goals. It's massive because never the world has had such a massive agreement of so many countries, both corporations as well, and individuals as well. So I think that if all of you could just see the magnitude of the Sustainable Development Goals as it's almost like as a framework for humanity, right, Dawda? I mean, you and I were working together when we saw the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon go to the Cannes Advertisement Festival and say that if the rings of the Olympics they symbolize the best of sports, the Sustainable Development Goals, he will aiming to symbolize the best of humanity. And you get so much traction, so many companies, so many people wearing the pins, so many people, using the colors and the logo and so on. So you're pivoting the Sustainable Development Goals to COVID-19 because that's exactly what a plan should do, right? It should be able to address the most important needs. And in this case, it's addressing the pandemic. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. I couldn't have said it more. And the interesting thing about this is, previous to this pandemic, we were looking at 17 different issues, potentially in silos and in isolation, even though they're meant to be interlinked, indivisible, and universal. What it is that we're looking at now is those 17 through the lens of health, in terms of how it addresses poverty, how it addresses health, how it addresses education, employment, climate, how it's in partnerships, all of these other lenses. And what we've done is really pivoted to looking at all of the 17 goals through the lens of COVID, because the world has been impacted negatively by that through the lack of resilience from health first and foremost, and seeing the domino effect down chain and downstream to the other areas from economic, employment, healthcare, education, travel, right? You think of how the world is shut down, goods and services, how things are being produced and gotten to where they're needed most. So it is a really dynamic framework. You're absolutely right. It is the framework that's going to lift us out of where we are. And in that, again, it's explicitly, even though 193 presidents and heads of state signed it, it calls on everyone, including individuals, including businesses, including media, including influencers, educators, and all aspects of society have a role and a responsibility to play there to be able to lift.
And COVID is showing us exactly what, the SDGs, we always said they are interconnected, the 17 goals, and they're universal. And it was hard to put into people's minds. Now you see it. It's affecting the way we, our education systems, our health system, our gender, it's affecting everything, but it's affecting us all. It's universal. COVID doesn't make any distinctions. It's just going across the countries. It's just going across the social economic status. Obviously, some people are by far more affected, and there is a risk that there will be consequences of people even left further behind. But I commend actually the UN of using the SDGs to pivot to a solution of COVID. So, Dawda, just because you mentioned a couple of the like the urgent things, and I see your stickers. You mentioned to me before, and we've been working together on this. You mentioned to me before, like 3 big blocks of how you at the United Nations see the macro perspective about the 3 main blocks. If I recall correctly, something like health, like stopping the pandemic, flattening the curve, but then there's a second phase which could be called like global solidarity, and how the world needs to come together, global community supporting each other, supporting the vulnerable, supporting the weak, and then will come a time of building back better, or something like that, which is recovery, pretty much. Just talk a little bit about those 3 phases and how, like how each of them activate.
Absolutely, and you've gotten those 3 phases exactly right, smack on. As everyone knows and probably is living in, and much of the world is locked down to flatten the curve. We are at the moment right now in a health emergency, and health plus, so it's health, economic, social, all of those other things behind there as well. And the idea of that is, and they're not mutually exclusive, and they have a lot of overlaps, these 3 phases, right? So it's the emergency, it's the solidarity, again, coming together to be able to build a fairer world and implement the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as we will only get through this if we work together in a concerted, universal way. And then obviously, as you pointed about, and you've developed a plan with regard to the Hispanic community itself around the response and the recovery phase. The recovery is, again, rewiring the world to give us, and I would argue, not what we were a month ago, because what we were a month ago has shown that with little cracks, they very quickly turn into canyons, and the resilience isn't necessarily there. But again, as I mentioned earlier, we are taking our lead from the health side of things, from the Director General, Dr. Tedros of the World Health Organization, and on the socioeconomic side of things from the Secretary General, both of whom have already hinted and indicated the need to go beyond just the emergency phase that we're in at the moment, to cover solidarity, to cover recovery, again, directly linking that back to the Sustainable Development Goals as the framework to execute on what it is. Hopefully now we will have the attention of the world writ large to not only finance it, but to really creatively think about what role and responsibility each of the different sectors, including governments, local governments, who in many cases are taking the lead where there is a lack of leadership at other levels, to really push and come up with the plans to keep people safe, to keep economies either static or reboot them when that time comes.
And not only that, but I hope that we can reinvent some of the rules that make no sense. I would love for Hispanics to take this opportunity of recovery to reinvent the rules where we are visible, where we're respected, where we're paid fully, where we're valued fully. So I don't want to go back. I just want to go back to better. This is giving us an incredible opportunity to be creative. And I think that if COVID has done something, is humanize and make sure that we understand that we all are human. Dawda, I want to end with one question, which is the call to action. So you sent this open brief to the world. You open it up. It's open until the 14th of April. It's calling on creative agencies and creative people to bring ideas on those 6 areas that you mentioned. So from hand washing, social distancing, fighting myth, busting myths, like all together, and global solidarity. You have more than 7,500 entries. You and I are working on Hispanics, activating the Hispanic creative industry and making sure that we pretty much are inspired by that brief. Well, what can people do, individuals or organizations, like Hispanic leaders here, that can take that? Can they, is the call to action, go to COVID-19 logo.org and stamps.org to batch everything they're doing, to make sure that they run campaigns, even if they are not, even if they are not creatives? What can Hispanic leaders and Hispanic community do?
I think that's absolutely right, Claudia. And again, thank you for your collaboration and support in all of this. It's been absolutely essential and has really helped supercharge all that we're doing. It is exactly that. It's use this content, disseminate it, push it to wherever you think it will be helpful to inform people on how to flatten the curve. We will do multiple briefs possibly into the future around other issues. We've seen a rise in gender-based violence, for example, because people are at home, which is a big issue. Next week, there's going to be an emphasis on protection of children. So again, it is, this brief and the potential use of the content is as dynamic as the situation in which we find ourselves at the moment. We are about to make a call to help distribute this information and this content as widely and as aggressively as we can. I would love to be able to rely and call upon the Hispanic community to help with that distribution and distribution on media channels, dissemination, person to person. Within certain networks, et cetera, et cetera.
All your networks. Dawda, before we go, and please repeat where people can find the logo, the stamps, and the creative assets.
Yep. So the logo is found at www.covid-19logo.org. The stamp is www.covid-19 stamps with an S at the end, .org, and the open brief is found at United Nations, all one word, .talenthouse.com.
Well, Dawda Jobarteh, the Global Head of the United Nations Sustainable Development Strategy Hub, thank you so much for having been with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and stay safe and be kind.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.